Hi everyone, welcome to Procrastination Points Video Snark. This video series isn't an audiobook, it's designed as commentary. This series emphasizes reading and listening comprehension skills. My focus is on reading books, identifying areas that miss the mark, and suggesting ways that they could be reimagined. I'm continuing my read-through of Chromatic by Ashley Bustamante. If you haven't seen the earlier videos, you can find the links below. Chapter 13. In the aftermath of the house collapsing, Eva turns to attack Jace. He uses mentalist magic on her to make her think that she's in pain, but she's able to see through it. He gloats, insisting that he did her a favor by removing two benefactors, although she's quick to call him out. He then leaves her to tend to Blake, despite the fact that not even 5 minutes earlier he'd been screaming for the other benefactors to bring Eva to him or else. Blake is understandably beside himself with grief over the thought of what happened to his parents. He insists on digging through the rubble of what used to be his family home with the thought that they could still be alive. Eva helps him, but not because she's also holding on to that last grain of hope. No, she's doing it because Blake needs closure about if his parents died or not. They find them, and they are indeed dead. Eva tells him that they need to leave, that other people will be coming soon because of what happened. When Blake refuses to go, she uses her augmenter abilities to pick him up and run off. When Eva gets back to the camp where they left the others, their friends set upon both of them. Blake is badly injured and needs medical help from more than one augmenter. While they're tending to Blake, Elm tries to help soothe Ava's bruised emotional state, but that's not exactly something you can care for with red magic. Although he uses his own magic to send Ava into a dreamless sleep, it's not something he can maintain forever. She wakes up when he stops. He encourages her to go over to where Blake is right then. She goes over and finds him in a contemplative mood. He says that he was kind of on the fence about how trustworthy that mentalists were if there wasn't a bit of truth or justice to what was going on. But for his parents to have been murdered simply because he showed up at their house, although Blake starts to talk about how innocent that his parents were, it's obviously not an issue of who was wrong and who was right. It's a super complex issue, especially on an individual level. Yes, his mother would never hurt a bug, but that doesn't mean that she didn't have her share of mentalist blood on her hands. Blake and Ava go back to where the others are. She leaves Blake with Nikki and goes over to where Blanca is. Ava explains about how it's obvious that the benefactors are hunting down the parents of their group, so they need to find her father before the benefactors do. They take some time to rest and regroup to plan it, then they set off. As they crest a hill, they find a field full of dandelions in their puff phase, which they all think is odd because before they got to the puff phase, there were first these bright yellow flowers. Somebody suggests that maybe the odd weather made the benefactors overlook them. They decide that the best thing to do would be to blow all the puffs off to spread the seeds. Elm plucks one and tells Ava to make a wish. She knows of the custom, but since the ban on yellow, it's been impossible to do so. She feels like her wishes are a bit more complex than a child's would be, but she obviously thinks about peace and safety. She knows that they should get a move on, but they're having so much fun that it's hard for Eva to tell everybody to stop. Eventually, some of the others use green magic to make charms with dandelion seeds in them, which they give to everybody as a memory and a reminder. Dandelions are known for being tenacious, after all. Love my Snark? I also offer book editing services where I bring that same approach to your writing. If you'd prefer a more traditional approach, I also offer professional book editing services. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions about my editing services, including pricing options. Chapter 14. The group of them goes into Violet City and go to where Blanca's dad lives. However, they've since learned from their mistake about Blake's parents and the listening device. Although now that I'm thinking about it, why the hell did Olivia continue to talk to the children knowing full well that the thing was there? I don't really want to victim blame, but yeah, this is kind of on her. Blanca eventually ends up writing her father a note and signs it using her father's pet name for her, which is Blinky. Yes, with an I at the end. They then use blue magic to levitate it up to the window and then use a stick to wrap on the window to get his attention. When Alfredo comes out, they all see that he's in a bad way. Ava wonders why it is that the healers can't cure him. He hobbles with the use of a cane and Blanca has to go and help him down the 3 stories to where they're hiding in the alley with the dumpsters. The happy reunion is briefly interrupted by a neighbor coming out. Blanca uses magic to levitate one of the rubbish bags in front of her father to make it look like he's simply taking the rubbish out. However, the neighbor acts like Alfredo is nothing but a complete invalid and is happy that he's getting out of his home. After the neighbor leaves, Alfredo complains about the rubbish bag. It makes Avery wonder why he can't seem to do magic. They then tell him about the listening devices and how the benefactors killed Blake's parents. Alfredo says that the story in the news was that the family was attacked by mentalists, which doesn't surprise me at all. When they talk about Alfredo leaving there for his own safety, Alfredo complains that he's in no condition to be going anywhere. At this point, Elm asks if Alfredo doesn't have a device planted on him. This is kind of an odd thing to say, which Alfredo complains about, but then both Kato and Nikki also echo Elm with the idea that they can sense something on him that shouldn't be there. Before this can go further, a random guy walking around stops to call out to Alfredo. However, he then rightfully guesses that Alfredo isn't alone and invites them all to his apartment to discuss things. Ava recognizes him as a random friend from the seemingly crazy lady from book 1 who first told Ava about white magic. The man, Donald, says that Elise was one of the good ones and that she was disappeared by the benefactors. Up in his apartment, Donald asks that they all turn invisible so that he can actually have a conversation with them. Elm turns visible first. Although Donald is a little shocked to see him, he doesn't cry out in alarm or suggest getting the benefactors. He also rightfully guesses that the others are the missing students from Prism. Donald listens to the children's explanation of things. Then he says that they need to go talk to somebody named Porter. That Porter has answers for stuff like what's going on with the barrier and even what's implanted in Alfredo. Nicky questions how wise it is to go, that their parents are in danger and they're being sent on seemingly random side quests. However, I feel like finding out more info about what's going on is in everybody's best interest. It's not like they can simply hustle Alfredo to Neo Prism, not in his current condition at any rate. Elm suggests that they should split up, one group to search for their families and the other to hunt down this Porter fellow. Blake and Nikki then present something that they've been working on, retrofitted butterflies. They've taken ones that they'd captured and made them into their own so that they can keep in communication with the other teams while they're working. They also have a feature that alerts when it's safe to talk or not, which seems kind of convenient to me because safe from what? It's never explained. If you're interested in reading my own stories, you can purchase my spicy short stories as well as 2 full-length novels on Amazon. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories. If you're not already following me on Reddit, I recommend doing so to stay updated on when I offer free content. Reddit is currently the only place where I'm advertising myself these days. Chapter 15. Ava goes with Blanca, Alfredo, Elm, Sam, and a couple of other supporters. However, since Alfredo is in such a bad condition, it takes them a couple of days to get there. I don't really care about how much time it took to get there, especially since we jumped into them getting to the address, but my main question is, how do they hide out for 2 days? This is literally never addressed, and it's kind of frustrating. Although the address Donald sent them to is literally a rundown shack. Anyway, the address Donald sent them to is literally a rundown shack. Although Elm uses his blue magic to open the door, he decides that he has to stick his entire hand into a blue stone that they find on the floor. Why do you bother with one if you're only going to do the second? Ugh. A trapdoor opens up, and upon Ava's suggestion, Elm uses green magic to make a fire. However, it takes a lot of effort for him to maintain the flame. After a while, Sammy agrees to try green magic with Blake so that they can give Elm a rest. They get to the end of the hall and find themselves in a rather nice living room, but once in there, bars come across the entrance, trapping them in. Patreon has recently introduced free memberships. By joining, you'll be able to enjoy the same content I post on Tumblr, now conveniently available on Patreon. Patreon supporters can enjoy even more book Snark starting at only $1 a month. Plus, Patreon now offers a 1-week free trial. Don't miss it. Big shout out to Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. Also, huge thanks to Josh and Mark for making a one-time donation. If you want to hear your name on my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Chapter 16. Obviously, being trapped in a strange man's underground bunker of a house makes our heroes a little cranky. The man, Porter, insists that he has a right to defend his home, which they did kind of barge in and announce, so I get it. However, upon seeing Alfredo, Porter is quick to raise the bars, but Alfredo seems confused over the entire thing and insists that he doesn't know who this man is. But Porter isn't all that surprised that Alfredo has no memory of him and even seems to expect it. Porter asks how it is that they came to find this place, so Ava describes the circumstances to them arriving there. Porter says that they're the second group who's shown up. At this point, Sky and Gavin show up, bringing Jasper with the other group, so Ava is quick to use the modified butterflies to tell them that their parents are there at Porter's. Gavin and Sky explained that after the children left, they thought that it would be in their best interest if they left as well. Obviously, that turned out to be correct. They seem to be grateful to have each other, as well as a possible reward of seeing their children again soon. Ava leaves them with the butterfly, and they all give them some privacy. At this point, Porter redirects his attention to Alfredo. He says that he can help Alfredo where the other healers have failed before. Blanca is reluctant when Porter mentions that this will cause Alfredo great pain, but Alfredo insists. Ava understands. In a world where you can immediately heal any broken bone or paper cut, being physically disabled must be quite awful. Porter asks if Ava can help with the healing, then asks Blake for his help as a shaper. Elm asks if there really is something inside of Alfredo, and Porter is surprised. However, upon identifying that Elm is a green magic user and Ava is an orange magic user, he's exceptionally delighted. At this point, Porter explains that the task at hand is twofold. The shapers will first shrink down the object implanted inside of Alfredo's brain, obviously being careful not to physically harm him. Then they'll remove it. After that, it's up to the augmenters to heal him. Sammy is put on watch duty since she's the only one with without something to do. Porter says the idea that they might be getting more visitors in soon, but Ava wonders if he didn't give her a task simply because Sammy was anxious and needed to be out of the way for this. They get to work on Alfredo. Elm goes a step further to stop Alfredo from being in pain, which is probably a good move here. As Eva steps in, she wishes that literally anybody else better at healing was there. Once it's out, Alfredo starts to cry, which obviously worries him something fierce, but then he begins his story. During the Canary War, his wife Sophia and his best friend Porter worked as part of the resistance. They created devices that would sort of segment away parts of the brain to hide information. This was obviously necessary in case of capture. However, the benefactors ended up killing Sophia in order to get to Alfredo. As a result, Alfredo begged Porter to put the mostly untested device in him in order to forget about the death of his wife. Men will do literally anything except go to therapy. Porter goes on to say that the untested device had the unintended side effect of not only physically damaging Alfredo's body, but also making him impossible to be healed. At this point, Blanca asks why it is that they're so important to the benefactors would go after them like that and kill her mother, to which Porter finally gives a proper introduction. He's Celine's brother. And I can't say that I'm surprised that he showed up. It was mentioned in a previous chapter, although I don't remember if I mentioned it or not at the time, but it's totally a Chekhov's character situation. Why would the narration bring up a character like this if he wasn't going to make an appearance in the plot? Porter says that he's a history buff, so when his sister went off the rails and started to emulate a certain man with a mustache from Austria, Porter began to gather up important historical things that would likely be destroyed. Again, kind of highlighting their resemblance to a German-led political movement in the 1930s and 40s. Ava then turns and looks at some of the books, all of which are noteworthy in their own right, Anne Frank and the works of Albert Einstein, J.R.R. Tolkien, and C.S. Lewis, the Holy Bible. I like the record to state that despite the fact that this was published by a Christian publisher, this is literally the first mention of anything in regards towards Christianity. 2.5 books into this series. However, thanks to the fact that Ava has been closed off from the rest of the world, none of this stuff means anything to her, and that includes the Bible. No, I will not let this go. Why was this picked up by the Christian publisher if there wasn't even a metaphor about religious themes? Anyway, after exclaiming about Porter's books, the narration remembers the plot. Ava asks if Porter knows how to dismantle the barrier, which is a more complex issue than simply a yes or no question. He shows them a map which is all marked up in ink. Each mark is a recorded site of a device of one of the 3 colors. There are dozens of them, and these are only the ones Porter knows about. Obviously, this disheartens them immensely. Elm is cautiously optimistic that removing a few of them will be enough to make the barrier unstable. However, Blanca offers up a more realistic opinion about this task, that doing this could take years, which is time that they don't have. Sammy offers up the opinion of running back to Neo Prism to stick their heads into the sand. However, I think that we all know that they're not going to do that. When Blanca offers up the idea that they'd come into the city to rescue the mentalist children, so that's what they should focus on. However, Porter destroys that idea with the fact that the group that they'd found might not be the only group. Not much in it is the idea that people in Magnus might also continue to give birth to mentalist children, or at least green and orange ones. Unless they go on a true eugenics spree and simply start killing anybody with any mentalist blood in them, they will never really resolve the problem of mentalists in Magus. Right now, their best option seems to be to hunt down the known devices and destroy them. Porter offers to make them physical copies since he doesn't have a copier, but he also invites them to stay and rest for a while as he's doing that. Thanks for watching. New Book Snark videos go live every Monday with occasional extras during the week. Your support means so much, even if it's not financial. Watching my videos, subscribing, and liking and sharing them with friends all go a long way in helping my channel grow. If you've already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Facebook, WordPress, Tumblr, or free on Patreon for my main Book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. A link tree for everything is posted below. See you next week, guys!